All right, so tonight we're going to continue our class on archaeology and evidences. We've been looking at artifacts and their relevance to what we read in the Bible. So sometimes it's confirmation of what we read in the Bible. Sometimes it's illumination of what we read in the Bible. Okay, and so we look at these artifacts to help us understand what the Bible, what they can tell us about the Bible. I will say this, when we look at archaeology and evidences, archaeology does not prove the Bible. You may remember that from the very first class. Archaeology does not prove the Bible. However, it can confirm the Bible and illuminate the Bible. Okay, and it is an important part of evidences, one that I think is neglected sometimes, and so I've chosen to incorporate that in this class. And again, I've said it before, if it looks like it's really familiar, it is, because everything in the Old Testament is identical, more or less, to the public lecture that I did on archaeology in the spring. Okay. However, we didn't get to New Testament during that lecture. We're going to get to New Testament here during this class. All right. So again, looking at some of the things here, the period that we're in. Tim, if you will take one of each of those are papers for the rest of the class. Okay, that will get you set for the rest of the class. So we've got Sennacherib is someone else we need to talk about. That is Sennacherib over there. Without pulling anything up, can you tell me where he's from?
Assyrian.
He's Assyrian, okay? And I say that because he has a very distinctive hair style and beard style. And I've said before that when you see things like that, you know that you're looking, by and large, at an Assyrian, or at least someone who is depicted in Assyrian art. So Sennacherib is king of Assyria from 705 to 681 BC. He is one of the most powerful of Assyria's kings. This guy is really significant in world history, and he is significant in biblical history as well, because it is Sennacherib who leads the campaign against Judah in 701 BC, some of which is recorded in the Bible. So he intersects with the biblical record here in Judah in 701 BC. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But one of the things that happens during his reign, during that invasion of Judah, is the siege of Lachish. The history behind this, we don't have time to go into it in detail, so I'm just going to lay it out for you. Hezekiah, who is king of what?
Judah.
Judah. He is king of Judah. Good king, bad king? Good king. Okay, remember, the northern kingdom is by this point in time gone. Never was a good king in the northern kingdom. In the southern kingdom, you had some that were good, some that were bad. Hezekiah is a good one. That's why we sometimes name our children Hezekiah, right? We don't name them Ahab. Okay? But you see Hezekiahs every once in a while. All right? So he's the good king. He stops paying tribute to Assyria in 705 BC. The northern king has been carried away. Judah is surrounded by Assyrian-controlled territory, and Hezekiah says, you know what, I'm tired of paying taxes to Assyria, so I'm going to stop in 705. Sennacherib's not very happy about that, so he moves south through the region, subduing several other nations who are also rebelling at this time. So they're technically under the control of Assyria, but they're rebelling, and so they're not paying their tribute. Hezekiah is not the only one. He moves south, subdues these nations. He comes up against Judah. He lays siege to the city of to the city of Lachish, which is Judah's second most important city. We always think of what city is the most important? Jerusalem, and it's got the most significant fortifications. However, Lachish is the second most important city in Judah at the time. Sennacherib is going to lay siege to it. I like maps. I'll bring up a map. If you look here, Lachish is down here. Jerusalem is up here. There is a very unfriendly power at this time over here. Who is that unfriendly power? Egypt. Okay. So as Sennacherib moves south, he's going to eventually, at least he wants to take Jerusalem. But before he's going to move against Jerusalem, he's going to take Lachish. Why?
It's in the plain rather than in the mountains.
Okay, it's in the plain rather than the mountains, so that's going to make it somewhat easier for him. But why Lachish? These guys never do anything just as accidental, okay?
Because if he takes out Lachish, then it would be a lot easier to take out Jerusalem.
Yes. Why? Remember that unfriendly power over here.
Egyptian reinforcement.
That's exactly right. He needs to take Lachish because if he goes against Jerusalem directly, he's going to have unfriendly Judahites on this side of him and Egyptians as well. So he comes down this way. The word just escaped me completely. He secures his rear so that then he can go up against Jerusalem. Lachish is a significant fortified city. If he goes against Jerusalem, he's going to have to worry about these people coming up and aiding Jerusalem. He's going to have to worry about these Egyptians down here as well. So that's what he does. This is a photograph of Tel Lachish. Tel is that artificial hill. We've talked about that. And it's what remains of the city today. And so there are some things here. There's an Iron Age palace up here. There is an inner gate to the city and an outer gate to the city. These are some remains of the fortifications of Lachish. You have an outer gate and an inner gate. Why do you have that?
Well, if they get through their first one, you got a second.
Exactly. It's double protection. If you get through one, you got to get through the other. Okay? Gates are the weak points, and at the same time, they're the strong points in a wall. Over here, you have the remains of the Assyrian siege ramp. The Assyrians are going to go up against the city. They're not necessarily focusing here. They're building a siege ramp to go up that way, to get into the city that way. Okay? This is a photograph of what remains of the Assyrian siege ramp. Okay? That's not a part of the natural hill. That was built. The Assyrians built that so that they could move their war machines up against the walls of Lachish. Okay? Well, they conquer Lachish. The city is destroyed. It's taken by the Assyrians. And Sennacherib decides that he needs to commemorate this, and he does, in a series of reliefs that are in his palace, I believe at Nineveh. We pull up the bullet points and you'll see that. So the palace at Nineveh, which is currently in Iraq, they're uncovered in 1845 to 1847. Take a guess where they're currently housed. I know you have it on your notes.
British Museum.
They're currently housed at the British Museum. Okay, they are a depiction of the siege of Lachish. Why does Sennacherib do this? So that everybody that goes to his palace walks by this. Oh, there is Sennacherib's army knocking off Lachish. And there's a whole lot of unpleasant things in those reliefs as well. If you get some close-ups of that, you'll see. The Lachish reliefs measure 17 by 39 feet. Not inches, feet. This is a significant piece of artwork. Okay? 17 high, 39 long, where he depicts what he does at Lachish. It is propaganda. Okay? It's propaganda. Every nation does this. Every nation does this. Okay? So, a good example, you go to Washington, D.C. Why are the monuments so big in Washington, D.C.?
Foreign leaders.
It's to impress people with our power and our wealth. And so you have the Washington Monument. When you go to the mall, what is the dominant feature of the mall in Washington? The Washington Monument. I mean, you can't miss it. It's tall. It's huge. You could go up in it. I'm not sure it's fixed now where you can. There's an elevator, but sometimes it's out of order. They're doing repair work. But that's the big thing. You walk around and it's big. So the state of Texas comes along. Are you all from Texas? No. Okay. Well, you're going to learn all about Texans. Okay. So the state of Texas comes along, and we build our own version of the Washington Monument, right? It's down outside of Houston at San Jacinto, commemorating that incredibly spectacular battle that lasted all of 18 minutes, where we won our independence from Mexico. And what do you do if you're a Texan?
Make it just a little bit taller than the
Just a little bit taller. That's exactly right. How does it get a little bit taller? You put a star on top of it. Okay? So yes, if you go down to San Jacinto and you see the monument down there, it is taller than the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. And that is a statement. Okay? Texas doesn't do that on accident. Texas does that on purpose. Nations do this all the time. So Sennacherib does this. Everybody who comes to my palace, they're going to see what I did to Lachish, and they're going to take that information back home. People are not going to want to mess with me. All right, so here is a close-up of part of this. The inscription says, Sennacherib, the mighty king of the country of Assyria, sitting on the throne of judgment before the city of Lachish, I give permission for its slaughter. And the city of Lachish is indeed slaughtered. So some more pointing out where things are. Up here in this part of the siege, in the relief, you have battering rams on the siege ramp. You have more battering rams on the siege ramp. These folks had weapons of war, machines, okay? When they go up against the city, they're not hitting it with hammers. They're going at it with towers and with battering rams. Down here, you have some slingers. We usually think of archers as being important in ancient armies. Slingers were probably as important, if not more so, than archers, because they could really sling those stones, and that could do a lot of damage. Just ask who?
David.
Ask Goliath, okay? Ask Goliath how much those stones can do damage, all right? So you've got slingers. By the way, in excavations, sling stones are found by the hundreds. Anytime a city has been besieged, they find these by the hundreds. I have one at home. I should have brought it up for tonight, but I have one at home that's made out of iron, okay? It is, I believe it is Greek. It's not from this period. It's not quite that old, but it's made out of lead, not iron. That's why it stays in its box, because I'm not going to hand a lead stone around here so that all of y'all get lead poisoning, right? Yeah. It stays in its box. Okay, but in this part of the relief, we see how nice the Assyrians were, the people they captured. These are impaled prisoners. Okay? And that's what the Assyrians like to do. They would impale some prisoners outside of the city walls of whatever city they were attacking, and they would tell the people in the city, if you surrender, this won't happen to you. Which, of course, was patently what? A lie. Because as soon as they conquer a city, they're going to take some of those captives along with them to the next city they're going after, and they're going to impale them there and give the same story. Okay? And people, I don't know if they ever got wise to that or not. So again, you're walking through the palace at Nineveh and you're seeing this and you're thinking, wow, these folks are not very nice. Okay? So we better not mess with Sennacherib and the Assyrians. All right, so another close-up. We have some slingers here. We have some archers over there, all a part of the army. And then finally, our last photograph from this, there are some survivors of the siege of Lachish. Notice women and children. They're being taken into captivity, okay? Because that's what the Assyrians did. The Assyrians had a policy of forced resettlement. We see that in the Old Testament. Again, confirmation of what we see in the Old Testament, where they would take people from a conquered territory, move them over here, and they take people from another territory and move them there. So in the New Testament, we have some people called the Samaritans. Who in the world are those people, and where did they come from?
They're intermarried with the people.
They're crossbreeds, okay? Or half-breeds, or quarter-breeds, or whatever you want to call them. They are the result of the mixing of these people in the northern kingdom. Because the Assyrians leave some Jews there, they bring some other people in there, and over time, they intermarry with each other. Okay? And that really gets going heavily in the intertestamental period, but that's the origins of the Samaritans we read about in the New Testament. And the Jews hated them, and the Samaritans hated the Jews. Okay? But it all comes back to this period. All right. So, Sennacherib, not done with him yet, he's really significant. He decides, after having taken Lachish, now he needs to go up against Jerusalem. Now, Hezekiah pays tribute. He decides this whole not paying tribute thing is not a good idea, so he pays the tribute. Assyria says, no, too late, should have thought about that. I want your total surrender. So an embassy from the Assyrian army is sent to Jerusalem. That is recorded in the book of Isaiah, 2 Kings, and 2 Chronicles. Right? That's a significant chunk of the record of that period. And it all involves what's going on between the Assyrians and the people in Jerusalem, specifically Hezekiah. Hezekiah does not surrender. The Assyrians don't back down. And so God steps into the picture. Okay? Remember the famous image of Hezekiah taking the letter and putting it before the Lord? And what's Isaiah's message? Don't worry about it. God's got this. Okay? God's going to take care of it. He's going to deliver the city. And in fact, he miraculously delivers the city. How does he do that?
He kills the army of Sennacherib.
Yeah, how many of them?
Over 100,000.
About 180,000 in one night. Okay? So here Sennacherib is. He's in Judah. His army's been wiped out. Okay? At this point in time, he doesn't have much left of his army. 180,000 are dead. He's still alive. Okay? What do I do with Jerusalem? Well, I can't conquer Jerusalem. That's not going to look very good. I go back to Assyria, I go back to Nineveh, and people find out how I didn't conquer Jerusalem. So he decides to fudge history. Facebook is not the first organization that has fake news, okay, and fudge things a little bit. He does as well. So he writes his annals. Those are his histories of his reigns. They are inscribed on various prisms. The three most significant are now housed at, yes, the British Museum in London, the ISAC in Chicago, so you don't have to go all the way to London. You can go to Chicago and see it, and the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. There are three of them, okay? They were created in 689 and 691 after this has all taken place. This is a photograph of one of those prisms over there, and it is just what it says. It's a prism made of stone. It's inscribed in cuneiform, and I want you to notice what he writes about all of this. He says, as for Hezekiah the Judahite, who did not submit to my yoke, 46 of his strong-walled cities, as well as the small towns in their area, which were without number, by leveling with battering rams and by bringing up siege engines and by attacking and storming on foot, by mines and tunnels and breaches, I besieged and took them. And that part is accurate. The Assyrians have laid waste to the kingdom of Judah. All right? Hezekiah himself, like a caged bird, I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city, full stop. End of story. So what does he say? He says, well, I besieged Hezekiah. He couldn't get out of his royal city. It was like a bird in a cage. Okay? What does he not say?
How many people he lost?
He doesn't say how many people he lost. He also doesn't say he took the city. He conveniently leaves that part out. A half-truth is a half what? Is a half lie. And that's what he does. But he's hoping no one's going to notice that, and that's what he writes on the prism. Again, there are 3 of these in existence. One in Chicago, one in Jerusalem, one in London. Right? Where he's written all of that, and it's just an interesting, it's confirmation and it's illumination of what's going on, because you see Sennacherib, clearly the man has got a pride problem, right? He doesn't take Jerusalem, but he's not going to go home and tell everybody that, so he goes home and he tells a story that is at least, well, maybe they're not going to ask. And maybe if they just passed by all those reliefs of people getting impaled, maybe no one's going to call Sennacherib's bluff on that. Tim?
Just out of curiosity, where did they find the 3 prisms? Were all in the same place, or just
various locations? Various locations. They all date to those years, though, that are on the slide. They were all created in a very small time frame.
So maybe it was made into a prism like this so that it would be easier to spin the truth.
Okay. Yes, there we go. Made in prison because it'd be easier to spin the truth. Good. All right.
Love it.
Oh, okay. You're here all week, right?
Yeah. Very political statement.
Okay, so let's continue on. After spinning the truth a little bit, we'll continue on. Next artifact from this period that's important is what's called the Siloam inscription. It's an inscription in Hebrew. It was created during Hezekiah's reign. Okay, so it's from the same time period. It was found by a 16-year-old whose name was Jacob Eliyahu while he was exploring Hezekiah's tunnel, which is in the city of Jerusalem. Eventually, that inscription is relocated to the Istanbul Archaeology Museum by the Ottoman government. So this is way back before World War I. That's when the Ottomans ruled this area. Okay? So they take the inscription, they put it in Istanbul. So if you go to Turkey, if you go to that museum, you can see the original. Israel would really like to have it back. Turkey cares nothing about it because it has nothing to do with Turkish history. So why doesn't Turkey give it back?
Because they have it. And they don't.
Because they have it and they can yank Israel's chain. Okay? So they've got it. Israel wants it. Probably not going to get it anytime soon. It's a source of tension between these two governments. Has been for a while. All right. So looking at the inscription, it describes the construction of the tunnel. Hezekiah builds this tunnel to divert water from the Gihon spring to the pool of Siloam. This is recorded in 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 20, 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verses 2 through 8. What he's doing here is he is increasing Jerusalem's supply of water during the time of Assyrian aggression. He expects the city to go under siege. You can go a long time without food, but you can't go a long time without what? Water. So we need to get more water into the city, and so they build this tunnel. And you can go to Jerusalem today, and you can see the tunnel. This is the Gihon spring, okay? That's actually the source of all of this. This is what's putting out water. It's a freshwater spring. It's a prolific spring, so it produces a lot of water. So by diverting that to the pool of Siloam, he's able to make sure that the city, the people of Jerusalem, have more water. Okay, so to give you an idea, This is the pool of Siloam. This is Mount Zion, okay? This is Mount Moriah. So it's a high point, it's a high point. The Gihon Spring is out here. It's actually outside the walls of the city. So what does Hezekiah do? He increases the sizes of the walls. He brings that into the walls, okay? But it's still on the edge of the city, okay? We want to get the water up here. So they build a tunnel that takes it up there. And it's going across these high points. It's actually going under these high points. It is a marvel of engineering. We think we're the only people that can build tunnels. And here they are building a tunnel like this way back in the Old Testament period. To give you a little bit different view of the city, if you can see this, remember how the line goes. The line goes this way, underneath this high point, underneath this hill. Here's the spring down here. Here's the pool of Siloam here. Okay? So they're not taking the easy route, which would be just kind of a parallel route. They're actually going up and under all of this to get down to the spring. So he's doing this to make sure that the city has water in case, well, he doesn't think in case, when the Assyrians come up and besiege the city. This is Hezekiah's tunnel. Again, you can go there today and walk it. You look at that fellow there, I think it's a guy. It's hard to tell in the picture. It's a guy. We're going to say it's a guy. Walking in the tunnel. You can go to Jerusalem today and do that if you have a mind to do that. What's interesting is what happens when the spring is not a continual spring. It apparently gushes. So what happens when it gushes? Is this guy in a dangerous place?
Oh, yeah.
No.
He's actually not because it goes up 18 inches.
Oh, it's all.
Okay? So he's not in any danger because even at high tide, if you will, unless he falls and bumps his head, he's not going to drown. All right? So he's walking through the tunnel. This is the original location of the Siloam inscription. It's there. It's inscribed into the rock. How do you get it out? You chisel it out, okay, and you haul it off to Istanbul to keep in your museum. All right. This is a replica of the Siloam inscription. You can see that it was broken some, I guess, maybe as they're getting it off of the wall. The inscription says this. It says the tunneling. Part of it's missing. That's the parentheses there. The tunneling. And this is the narrative of the tunneling. While the stone cutters were wielding, again, if it's in those marks, it means it's missing, the picks, each toward his co-worker. The picks, each toward his co-worker. And while there were still 3 cubits to tunnel through, the voice of a man was heard calling out to his co-worker, because there was a fissure in the rock running from south to north. And on the final day of tunneling, each of the stone cutters was striking the stone forcefully so as to meet his co-worker, pick after pick. And then the water began to flow from the source to the pool, a distance of 1,200 cubits. How long is a cubit?
18 inches.
18 inches. So what is that, 1,800 feet? Is my math somewhat correct? Is it close? And 100 cubits was the height of the rock above the head of the stone cutter. So 100 cubits up is where the rock is, and it's going 1,200 cubits long. This is an incredible feat of engineering that they do. Right? And they're coming at it from 2 different directions, and they meet in the middle. They're off a little bit. They've got to do a little bit of a jog there to make it work, but they make it work. It's kind of like the Golden Spike. Remember when the 2 railroads are being built in the west? One's coming this way, one's coming that way. They meet in the middle, and they put that Golden Spike in, and the railroad is completed. That's what this is. That's what basically is happening with here. So the Bible record tells us about Hezekiah doing these things. Then we get archaeological confirmation of it from outside of the Bible. It kind of illuminates that because you get just a mention in the scriptures. Now you kind of get a feel for these guys picking away at the rock, underground. What hangs in the balance? Their wives, their children, the survival of the city when the Assyrians come up to besiege it. All right. Well, let's move a little bit later in the period then, out of the Assyrians down to the Babylonian period. We get some seal impressions from the Babylonian period. We talked about Hezekiah and Isaiah, okay? Their seals that were discovered in Jerusalem. There's some others as well, actually quite a few others. These particularly are 3 particularly important prophets during the last days of the kingdom of Judah: Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, okay? Jeremiah's book mentions quite a few individuals in Jerusalem, as do other historical records in Scripture. And what do we do when we're reading the book? We see all those long names that we can't pronounce. We just skip over them, right? Of course we do. Maybe even I do, okay? But they show up outside of the Bible. These seals confirm the biblical record and the historicity of these individuals. So let's look at some of them. Here is the first one. This is the seal of Gemariah, son of Shaphan. Jeremiah 36 and verse 10. Okay. It's excavated in 1982 by Professor Yigal Shiloh. Then we have another seal. This is of Gedaliah, the son of Pashur, Jeremiah 38 and verse 1. It's excavated in 2007 by Dr. Eilat Mazar. Then we have Jehukal, the son of Shelemiah, Jeremiah 37 and verse 3, excavated in 2005, again by Dr. Eilat Mazar. So they're excavating. These things are usually found when they sift the rubble. Okay, they have all this stuff, little stuff. And it's not the big stuff, so you kind of put that in a pile, and eventually you go through with a screen and you sift it to see what's in there. And most of the time, most of what's in there is just junk, okay, or rocks. But then you find these. And these are really small. When I went to the museum exhibit in Edmond, Oklahoma, that's where they have the Hezekiah and Isaiah seals up there at the Armstrong Institute, I was shocked because I kind of thought, it's going to be some big piece of clay. It was tiny. They had a magnifying glass beside it so that you could look at it up close if you wanted to. It was that small, okay? Just little small seals. So they find them usually when they're sifting the remains of the excavation. Some more. Here's another one. This is Azariah, son of Hilkiah. Look at 1 Chronicles 9, 10, 11. Ezra 7 and verse 1. Excavated in 1982, again by Professor Shiloh. Then we have another one. This belonged to Nathan Melech, servant of the king. Notice 2 Kings chapter 23 and verse 11. And then we also have the stone seal of Ikar, who is the son of Mattaniah. You can look at 2 Kings chapter 24 and verse 17. Both of those were excavated in 2019 by Yuval Gadot and Yiftach Shalev. So these are really, really recent. It's 2024. This was 5 years ago. 5 years ago. All right? This is a clay seal. This is the stone seal. Okay? This is the impression made from the ring. This is what's in the ring to make the impression. So if you are Ikar, you got a ring. And on that ring, you have your seal. And anytime you need to make sure that something is yours and you want it marked as such, you put some clay on there and you put your ring into it. Okay? So that's what creates those. And they find those every once in a while in excavations as well. Sometimes they even find the whole ring. And this is an example of this. This is Hanan's signet ring. Again, you see the stone there. And by the way, it's in reverse. Because in order to get it to be readable in the clay, it has to be a mirror image. So it's in reverse. All right? This belonged to Hanan. It was his ring. The ring with the seal emerged on the antiquities market. Okay, that's significant because anytime it shows up first in an antiquities market, everybody's concerned about whether it's a fake or not. All right? Because there are lots of fakes out there. Where's a good source for fakes today? eBay. Okay? You can go on eBay and you can find almost anything. And you got to be real careful because those are just fakes, right? Things that have been created. So that was the question about that. The inscription on it reads Hanan, son of Hilkiah. Now, Hanan, son of Hilkiah, is unknown in Scripture. Azariah is known. He's actually mentioned in the Bible. No Hanan is mentioned in the Bible. So who would this Hanan be? Azariah's brother. Okay? So they're both the son of Hilkiah. He's mentioned in Scripture. He's not, but we have his ring. This ring, now that's Azariah's seal. Okay? This ring has been reasonably shown that the same craftsman that created Azariah's seal, that made that bulla, created Han's as well. Okay. So if that's authentic, that's going to be authentic as well. And it's the same guy doing this stuff. Right? It's just like you can tell an artist by their paintings. Okay? I can say, I don't know, Picasso, and you can probably think about what Picasso's going to look like, right? I can say Michelangelo. Michelangelo doesn't look anything like Picasso, does it? Completely, totally different kind of artwork. All Right? So they can tell from how the letters are formed and how the craftsmanship is done that the seal that created that would have been created by the same individual that created that seal. Tim, you had a question?
I wasn't. I was just.
Oh, you were just straight
Yeah.
glasses. Okay.
Yeah, but no.
So you didn't have a question, but now you do.
You know, I was just saying. Well, if that was me, I wouldn't be able to tell how they figure that all
Well,
out.
this is because you cannot read 5th century BC Hebrew.
Yes, that's part of it.
But you know what, Tim? That's okay. I can't read 5th century BC Hebrew, and I can't even read modern day Hebrew. So I wouldn't know either. Yeah.
They teach that stuff?
Oh, yeah, they do. Absolutely, they do.
Right here, over here.
I had a
Yes.
question. So, on the seals and stuff, how do they know? Is it like, okay, is that like Smith and Jones? I mean, how do they know it's the same person? You know what I'm saying?
Because
Is it a name that's common or uncommon?
well, not completely common, but when you have somebody, son of somebody, and it dates to the right period based on excavations, then there's no reason not to believe it's the right one. Yeah. It's kind of like the Jesus, well, not the Jesus ossuary, the James ossuary. There's been a lot of discussion about that. The James ossuary says that an ossuary is a bone box. Okay, we'll see one in a little while. Said that it belonged to James, the brother of Jesus. And people have pointed out that James is not an unusual name in 1st century Jerusalem, and it's not. Jesus is not an unusual name in 1st century Jerusalem, and it's not. Okay, Jesus is the Greek equivalent of what?
Just
Joshua. James is the Greek equivalent of Jacob. So you can picture that in a Jewish environment, there'd be lots of Jacobs and Joshua's running around. Okay, so not an unusual name in and of itself, but what's unusual about it is that usually you're identified by your father. In this particular case, it's James, the brother of Jesus, which is highly unusual, which lends credence to, if it is authentic, leads credence to it really being the James that we read about in the New Testament. So they pull all that evidence together. And I will tell you, there will be some archaeologist out there that says, no, that's a fake. Okay? But mainstream, when they look at the evidence, that's what they're coming up. They can tell where it's from. They can tell, by the way, the period based on the Hebrew. This is something I really didn't understand until I started dealing with some old documents in English and in Czech, and writing changes. If you were to try to go back and read your great-great-great-grandparents' written letters, you might have a hard time reading it, because even in English, the way we write letters has changed. And so they can tell, based on how the letters are formed, what period it's coming from. So that helps as well, plus the level that it's excavated in. Lots of lines of evidence to look at.
Well, if you think about in terms of a person's signature, my signature is very different from my mom's or my dad's. I mean, it's very obvious. And so, like one of the guys that used to work on my team said, I've tried to fake your signature, which why would you admit that he did? And he said it's impossible because I would sign everything with my initials, but I would interweave the initials, and he couldn't replicate it. So, I mean, that's part of what you're looking at is the process of a signature or somebody's handwriting.
Yeah, and that's why they can
pretty unique.
Seem that it's pretty reasonable. It's like
Yeah.
All right, so let's look on a little bit farther. Another cylinder to look at is the Cyrus cylinder. Cyrus captures the city of Babylon in 539 BC. Instead of deporting captive peoples, he takes a different approach. He returns them to their homes. Go back to wherever you're from and build temples. And in those temples, please make sure that you pray for
Him and
me.
his son.
Okay? Pray for me. All right? Pray for my empire. All right? I like happy people. And I like happy gods. And so go back and whoever you worship, whatever your God is, go back, worship him, pray for me. All right? This particular policy is mentioned specifically in regards to the Jews in two biblical texts. One of those is 2 Chronicles 36, verses 22 through 23. Also Ezra chapter 1, verses 1 through 11. The policy is also attested to in the archaeological record, but before I mention that, before we go to the next slide, God sends the Jews off into Babylonian captivity. God also raises Cyrus up. Isaiah tells us that. Isaiah lives long before the time of Cyrus. God raises Cyrus up so that Cyrus can do what?
Return the Jews.
Return the Jews back home. Because remember, the captivity was only going to be 70 years. So Cyrus becomes king. Persians are completely different. We're not like the Assyrians. We're not like the Babylonians. We're going to send everybody home. We want everybody to be happy. And they establish a pretty prosperous, long-lived empire in terms of the ancient world. Okay, if you sign up for the intertestamental period class, we will talk about Persia because they're important. Okay, so he does this. He sends all these people home. Significant for the biblical record is the Jews get to do what? They get to go home. All right. So they're back in Jerusalem. They're going to build a temple eventually. They're going to rebuild the city walls of Jerusalem eventually. So big people in this period. Ezra. Who else? Nehemiah. Okay. Big important people in terms of the history of the Jews. But they're able to do this because Cyrus sends them home. And Cyrus is king because
God allowed it.
God said so.
Oh, I would say it even differently. Not just God allowed it, God made it so. Okay? God made it so. That's the import, I think, of what Isaiah says. Cyrus is God's anointed. He's got a job to do. Does Cyrus know that?
No.
No. Okay? But God does. Alright, so this is the Cyrus cylinder. And it is round for spinning the truth, apparently. This would be easier to spin. Okay. The problem with that is these were not spun. They were not spun. Okay. They were buried. These are foundation cylinders. They were buried in the foundation, the cornerstones of temples. This one was never really intended to be read because it was put in the temple. Okay. Kind of like we do what? We have a cornerstone. What do? We put a time capsule in it. All right. Somebody can read it 100 years later. So maybe they expected someone to open it up 100 years later. All right. So again, excavated in Babylon. This time, 1879, by Hormuz Dosan. It's housed in the British Museum. Okay. It's a foundation deposit under Babylon's main temple. Its primary concern was Babylonian. Okay. This does not have the biblical text. There is no specific mention of the Jews, but it is the same policy. Okay? Go back, rebuild temples. All right? I want happy people who are worshiping happy gods. Because remember, these people worship all the gods. And so make sure everybody's worshiping whatever gods you're worshiping, because they usually view gods as being localized. And all of these gods that are in different territories of my empire, I want all of them helping me out here. All right?
Did it have time capsule in it? That one?
That's the time capsule.
Oh, that is the time.
That's buried in the foundation.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
All right. So this particular inscription says, I return to these sacred cities on the other side of the Tigris, the sanctuaries of which have been in ruins for a long time, the images which used to live therein. Images, what are those?
Idols.
Idols. Which used to live therein and established for them permanent sanctuaries. I also gathered all their former inhabitants and returned to them their habitations. So go back home. Build some temples. Here's the idols we took away from those temples so that you can go back and worship them. Now, for the Jews, there is no idol of Jehovah. So what do they get to take back?
Menorah.
The
Utensils.
bowls.
All those utensils from the temple. And they're mentioned specifically. Okay? So Ezra gets to take these things back so that they can use them in the temple. Because, this strange God of the Israelites, they don't have an idol of him. But he's got all this stuff that he uses. Okay, so take the stuff, all right? Because we want who to be happy?
God.
All the gods, including the God of the Jews. Okay, even though he doesn't have an idol, take these things. Okay? All right, so that's the Cyrus cylinder, meant to be buried. These are proclamation tablets. Interestingly enough, these were excavated long ago, but were not deciphered until 2009. When they were deciphered, it was realized that their texts are the same as for the Cyrus cylinder, but their form was different. They are not meant to spin the truth. They are meant to have the handwriting on the wall. Okay? All right? They were designed to be read as proclamations. And so these were public announcements, if you will. Okay? In a wall somewhere.
Kind of like a placard at the post office.
Yeah.
Or the county courthouse.
Exactly.
Elected this day, mayor, whomever, postmaster, whomever.
Which mayor paid for this? Who was the president when it was paid for, and all of that kind of thing. Yeah. We have these all over the place. They're so common to us that we hardly even pay attention to them anymore because they're everywhere you go. Public buildings, offices, all sorts of things. If you go to some Texas towns, Granbury is one that I think about, or actually Decatur. You don't have to go to Granbury. You can go to Decatur, walk around the square, and there'll be all these kinds of plaques. This building was built in 1850, whatever. Okay, this was the original bank. Things like that. So these are like that, except they have the same text as what's in the Cyrus Cylinder, which is, go back home, build your temples, make your gods happy. Okay? Take the idols with you so that everybody's happy. I don't know how long those had laid in the collection of the British Museum before somebody said, you know what, we really ought to figure out what those things say. Oh, that text sounds awfully familiar. And that was the conclusion they reached. Okay? That it's the same text as the Cyrus Cylinder. Literally, it's not a jab at the experts in any of these museums. They literally excavate thousands of tablets written in cuneiform. There are a limited number of people that can read cuneiform. Okay? I mean, it's not a handful. There's a lot more than that. But it's not like you can go down to downtown Fort Worth and find 5 people immediately that can read cuneiform. So it takes a while to decipher these things. 2009, that's like yesterday.
But maybe with AI, they'll be able to speed it up.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Is that AI may help with some of these things. I'm an AI skeptic. It's coming, I know, but I don't know. I just, I like the idea of the old guy sitting at his bench in a back room of a museum deciphering these things, not a computer, but it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
So, as long as we don't build robots with AI to replace preachers, I'm okay.
So the interesting thing is, you're not going to get the Bible story in this of, what caused the paradigm shift. You think about, you had all this cheap labor, right? And, you got all these people that are going to follow whatever. They've been taken from wherever. This is all they've got is what you've given them. You've moved them all over the place, right? But then you have the story of Belshazzar, right? So, he's the son of Nebuchadnezzar, and he decides to have a big party. And he gets all of his wives and his concubines and his generals and all of his heads of state, and they have a big party, and they're all getting drunk, having a good time. And he has a pause there, and he sees his hand writing on the wall, right? And, it's, you've been weighed in the balances and found wanting, and your days have been numbered. And then he's killed that night. And then these guys get power, right? But, what were they doing? They were playing with all the temple utensils, right? Having a big party. And so that might be enough to cause a paradigm shift in the kingdom. Okay, the next guys take over, and, maybe we don't do this kind of stuff and have parties with all these other gods' things,
Right.
But it's interesting, to think about what would have caused the paradigm shift. Why would you just let my people go, right? It would have to be something similar of that nature that would jar the kingdom to just let my people go.
Well, and they definitely do that because you get a lot of people then moving within the empire. And, you think about it, a lot of Jews have settled in Babylon and they'll stay.
Right.
Okay, they won't go back. But the longing for the ancestral home is very strong in a lot of people. Not so much. It's different. It's different for us as Americans because we as Americans are a people that never stay put. We move constantly. If your family's been in America for 200 years or 250 years, they started on the East Coast and they have probably steadily moved west. They might have ended up in California, even. Okay, maybe they moved back, but they might have ended up in California. We don't have that tie to the land that so many other people in the world have, and so many people in the ancient world had. And so when the Jews get a chance to go home, that's Israel. That's Jerusalem. That's where God has put his name. We're going back there. So, Alrighty, so we did not finish, but this is all new material. This was not in the lecture. So Sunday, we're going to start the New Testament period on archaeology. We may get to that, but in any case, I want everybody to get that if they haven't already.